Chapter 1. Let me reintroduce you to your son. Let me reintroduce you to your son. If he is a typical underachieving teen, he complains bitterly about everything that is wrong with school. The teachers are stupid, the curriculum is irrelevant, math is just moving numbers around, and English is just moving words around. No one ever needs to know geometry, and Shakespeare is an absolute waste of time. Meanwhile, you never see him studying. He is the boy who has no homework, but his grades are slipping. Here is what you have probably done so far. When you are not sick with worry, you are nagging. Or maybe you are fighting, with him and or with your spouse or co-parent. You have been so anxious about his future that you have pestered him constantly about homework and upcoming tests. You may have even enrolled him in a summer class as suggested by his college admissions counselor. Maybe you took him to see a therapist. To others, he looks like a nice kid, soft-spoken, engaging, and polite. But to you, he seems unmotivated, and maybe even lazy. All of your begging, pleading, and berating have failed to light the fire of motivation under your son. If you have picked up this book, chances are you are following comments and questions posed by some of the parents who attend my lectures will strike a chord. What options do I have left when consequences don't work? I take away his phone, the computer, and he just says, "Fine, take it away. I don't care." I don't know how to talk to my son anymore. When I try, he grunts or says, "Leave me alone." He is only motivated if he likes a teacher, or if he is really interested in the subject. Otherwise, forget it. If only he worked a little harder. If only he cared a little more. If you want to get to know your child better, take out a ruler. Ask him to rate how important school is for him on a scale from 1 to 12. Then ask him to rate his social life and extracurricular activities. You'll be surprised, but he will likely score highest at least 9 or above on the school question, second on the social question, and last on the extracurricular question. Now use the same ruler to ask him how capable he feels of success in each of these areas. Don't be shocked if the order is reversed. In other words, things are not always what they seem. Your son actually wants to do better in school. He just does not think he is able to. His apparent laziness actually traces back to a fear of failure, otherwise known as anxiety. This type of anxiety is present in all unmotivated, underachieving teens, including those with learning disabilities, those with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and those who deal with the challenge of adolescence by resorting to substance abuse or promiscuity. Whether your son's low self-esteem is the cause of his high school problems or merely secondary to any of the above conditions, it's the first thing you need to address in order to help your son. But here's the thing. Where most parents fail is thinking that in order to improve their son's self-esteem, they have to shower him with praise. The truth is that praising kids with low self-esteem is just as problematic as criticizing them. Deep down, your son feels that you are measuring and evaluating his performance, which makes your love appear conditional. So in this case, positive feedback is not the way to go any more than is negative feedback. What you have to do is to stop evaluating and measuring him. And in case you haven't figured it out yet in your own life, you cannot force another person to change. That is particularly true about your teenage son. The tide is definitely against you here. While your son is not an adult, he thinks he is, and he certainly wants to be treated like one. At the very least, he wants to be treated like a free agent, and the only thing standing in the way of this daydream is you. He therefore must fight you off, even if the only way he can do that is by getting worse. So what's a parent to do? In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey describes his experience with his own teenage son, who was failing socially, academically, and athletically. At first, he and his wife encouraged him to be positive and hopeful. When this didn't work, they sent him to therapy. But that made him feel that there was something wrong with him, which made the situation even worse. At some point, Covey decided that his relationship with his son was more important to him than his son's success. He knew that the key to having a better relationship was to accept him as he was, rather than wishing him to be someone else. As a highly educated man who had made it to the top of his profession, this was impossible to achieve without undergoing what he calls a paradigm shift. To get there, Covey had to evaluate his entire belief system and the conventional wisdom about success and what is important in life. It was only when he became convinced that success, as defined by our society, was not important to him that he was able to accept his son as he was. As he reports, once he made this paradigm shift, his son started to improve in school and socially, ultimately turning the corner to become a motivated and successful teen. Whereas Covey tells us this story to illustrate the meaning of a paradigm shift, for our purposes, the import of this story is that the parent stopped focusing on his son and instead focused on himself. So rather than evaluate your son's performance, use the following exercise to refocus your attention on yourself. Write down 3 to 5 strengths and weaknesses that describe you as a person. Be honest in writing down your weaknesses. Don't treat this like the typical job interview question, where your weaknesses is really a strength. I care too much. Next, as unpleasant as it might seem, zoom in on your weaknesses. Think of examples where they've caused you embarrassment, shame, or humiliation. Recall how you failed because of those weaknesses. Now imagine how much better you would feel about yourself if your kid was a brilliant student and got into an Ivy League school. That would be great, wouldn't it? But is that your son's responsibility? To make you feel better about yourself? And furthermore, is criticizing him about his weaknesses going to correct them? Clearly, it has not worked so far. So let's try something different. Try to accept that your weaknesses are a part of who you are. You have done your best throughout your life to try to improve, but you are imperfect. Try to forgive yourself and accept yourself for who you are with these problems. Pause here and take a breath to contemplate that notion. If you can do that, you've already gained more understanding of your son, as well as more distance from his struggles. You can now begin to be more objective about what would help him. It is only when you reach this level of objectivity that you can develop a plan to help your child. If greater objectivity is the first essential ingredient, greater empathy is the second. To get there, focus on how you felt about yourself as a teenager. Try to recall the cool boy or girl who did not give you the time of day. Remember the teacher who humiliated you in front of the class. Did you ever get a 70 on a math test and not tell your parents about it? What was the worst grade you ever got? What about those parties that you weren't invited to? What about the truly stupid things you did or said to someone that you still regret? Once you allow yourself to become immersed in these experiences, you will feel more empathy for your son and will be able to see the world from his point of view. Armed with these 2 essential ingredients, objectivity and empathy, you are ready to become not just a well-intentioned parent, but also a helpful one. Now let's do one more thing to really sharpen your ability to empathize and be objective. It's an exercise called, Who Do You See When You Look at Your Child? Take out a piece of paper and jot down your answers to the following questions. 1. How is your child like you, not like you, your spouse/partner? 2. What do you hope he becomes, not just happy? 3. What are your regrets about your childhood, your adult life? What mistakes have you made that you hope your son does not? 4. What aspects of life do you wish were easier for your son than they were for you? 5. What childhood experiences were important for you? Do you want your son to have the same ones, going to the same summer camp/college? 6. Which of his interests are the same as or different from yours? 7. Which interests do you feel good about? Which are his interests that you couldn't dream of sharing in a million years? Which do you feel uncomfortable with or disapprove of? Do you consider any to be a waste of your child's time? If so, why? 8. Is he critical about anything about himself? What does he put himself down about? What are the personal limitations that he struggles with? 9. Write a description of your child. Try to write it as an objective, compassionate observer. Don't refer to him as your son or a child. When you are writing this, just refer to him by his name. The 4 sons. I hope at this point I have dispelled the belief that your son is lazy. He does not lack motivation to do well in school. He has mixed feelings about trying his hardest. He is insecure about his chances of academic success, an insecurity that often stems from ambivalence about becoming an adult. While the issue of self-esteem cuts through the difficulties of all teenagers, there are several distinct types of kids who fall under the opt-out umbrella. For the sake of simplicity, we will break it down into 4 types. There is some overlap, and you may recognize your child in more than one category. These descriptions should give you a clearer picture of why your son opts out. Mr. Oppositional. Patrick O'Donnell was extremely polite to adults other than his parents or teachers, friends' parents, his parents' friends. Even I, his therapist, were safe from the antagonism Patrick saved for the authority figures in his life. In therapy, he complained bitterly about everything that was wrong with the prestigious private school he attended. The administration made stupid policies, did not care about the students, and offered a curriculum that was irrelevant. Tellingly, while he had no time for school assignments, Patrick was a voracious reader. He favored New York Times, books on politics, and websites such as Politico and Real Clear Politics. But you wouldn't have known it from his report cards. Patrick's father, whose own hard work and discipline had landed him a partnership at a prestigious New York law firm, frequently battled with Patrick over his grades, study habits, and lack of motivation. Mr. O'Donnell asked to see his son's homework each night, spoke to his son's teachers frequently, and took away Patrick's laptop when he missed assignments. He even tried paying Patrick to do his homework. However, the more restrictions he imposed, the more Patrick shut down and blamed the school and his father for his failure. Patrick was upset about the way a lot of things had been handled during his parents' divorce, things that he had no control over. In some ways, rebelling against school was his revenge. It made his parents angry. And when they were angry, he held the reins. Patrick fits the mold of a type of boy I call Mr. Oppositional. Mr. Oppositional tends to be bright and opinionated. He is a power struggle waiting to happen. He makes teen rebellion into a competitive sport, frequently challenging his parents' authority and sometimes his teachers as well. His goal is to protect his independence at all costs, often because his parents are too controlling. He is defiant because he is angry. By the time they reach my office, the parents of Mr. Oppositional are worn out. They feel they have lost the battle. If your son is anything like Patrick, the problem is that you have become the enemy. You probably took too strong a hand in helping him stay on top of his studies when he was younger, maybe because you felt it was the only way he could pass. And now all he wants is to knock you from your throne. You are also too willing to engage in lengthy negotiations with him about the consequences of getting bad grades. You have trained him to be a good lawyer and to never take no for an answer. He has probably been talking you out of consequences for many years now. These negotiations are power struggles in disguise, and power struggles are the death trap of parenting a teenager. Since the only thing that matters to your teen in this battle is his sense of autonomy or control, he has nothing to lose. He will escalate the conflicts as high as he can in order to win. Mr. Do It For Me. Max's parents were desperate. They wanted someone to convince him to do his homework. Max was failing school and jeopardizing college. However, he was also a local legend. What started as an occasional gig DJing school dances grew into an entertainment company that competed with professionals on the wedding and bar mitzvah circuit. As an entrepreneur, Max showed real promise, but his DJing left little time for school. He only did his homework with a tutor, whom his parents had hired to come twice a week. He only ate if meals were served on a tray in his room. Otherwise, he will not eat, said his mom. And at 16, his mother still picked out his clothes. The classic Mr. Do-It-For-Me does not pick up his clothes from the floor, do the dishes, or turn in his own homework assignments on his own. There is no need, with his parents hovering close by, ensuring that everything goes well for him. This overindulgence is not about parents giving too much in the material realm. It's about parents doing too much. Therefore, it's not a problem exclusive to affluent families. Mr. Do-It-For-Me's parents mean well. They are often trying to compensate for a problem their son faces, such as ADHD. They make sure he completes his homework by sitting with him, ensure that he makes it to practice by packing his soccer bag, and believe they are doing the right thing by dialing down expectations and requiring nothing of him other than passing grades. As a result, these boys end up believing they are truly special and that things will come easily to them. They come to rely on the tutors, coaches, and therapists their parents hire to assist them, and end up with unrealistic expectations about how far they can go in life with little effort. Mr. Do-It-For-Me needs to change, but so do his parents. Mr. Popular. Cameron could not make waiting for a bus entertaining. He was always upbeat and playful, and he loved to have a good time. He only listened to music that made him feel good, a philosophy that extended to most of his life. His nickname was the Camster. Most people liked Cam, and though sometimes cocky, he was not the type to put other kids down. He was a star soccer player who always placed his sports and social life above school. That is, until poor grades jeopardized the future college scholarship and caused Cameron to realize that he needed to shift his priorities. Desperate to try anything in order to play soccer in college, Cameron agreed to therapy. And it turned out there was one thing Cameron was not very confident about: his intelligence. With his back up against the wall, he had no choice but to apply himself. Knowing how competitive Cameron was, I bet a bag of his favorite candy, Cam loved candy, that he could not turn in his homework every day for a month. It was a bet I was eager to lose, and did. I also challenged Cameron's notion that he was born with a fixed amount of brain power and could not get any smarter. We will talk about this in Chapter 12. These things helped, and Cameron turned his grades around. Life could not be better for Mr. Popular. He is often an exceptional athlete or has tremendous appeal. People admire his natural talents and are drawn to his personal style and charisma. Mr. Popular has gotten used to the instant gratification that his talents bring. The future looks bright. Things are going well in high school, so why should the rest of his life be any different? He is sure that his talents will glide him into college, maybe with an athletic scholarship to boot. Meanwhile, deep down, he may doubt his intelligence. So far, he has been able to sneak by. You too may have fallen prey to his charm and valued his athletic feats above all else. You may also have cut him too much slack for carousing or hanging with his crew, even as he was failing at school. Mr. Uncertain. Unfortunately, the sophistication of Aiden's humor was lost on the average 8th grader. Though he was exceptionally sharp, few people got him. His parents knew how bright he was, but this only made them angrier that he was not an A student. The well-meaning intentions of a teacher backfired when the career inventory she administered indicated that Aiden should become a landscaper. Somehow this finding proved to Aiden that he just did not measure up. He loved all things technical and took pride in knowing more about computers than anyone in his grade, but his teachers only seemed interested in his lack of effort. He complained that they did not like him. Though he played sports, Aiden did not feel especially good at them, so he took refuge in video games, the only area where he felt competent, and which provided status among his friends. Even though others recognized him to be bright, Mr. Uncertain often has little confidence in his own abilities and is usually socially insecure as well. He has not yet discovered his strengths and feels helpless, suffering from a lingering sense that he is simply not good enough. He would rather hide behind a lack of effort than take a risk that might prove he is really not so smart after all. Unlike Mr. Oppositional or Mr. Do It For Me, Mr. Uncertain does not express his anger directly at his parents. Rather, he turns it on himself, which sometimes results in depression. As his parents, you are definitely frustrated by Mr. Uncertain's lack of effort, but you do not always know what is going on with him. He may have a learning issue you do not understand. You may have held him to too high an academic standard without appreciating how insecure he really is. Mythbusters. Now that you've met a few opt-outs, it's time to really break out of the "he's just lazy" paradigm and into a new one. In order to do so, a few myths need to be debunked. Myth 1. He's up for the challenge. Do you believe your son is actually intellectually and emotionally ready to take on all of the challenges thrown his way? He isn't. More boys are opting out because, in the past 2 decades, the goalposts have been moved. Educational demands have dramatically increased. What used to be a manageable playing field now requires extraordinary drive and talent. A kindergarten teacher recently told me 10 years ago we expected the children to be able to count to 20 by the end of the year. Now it is 100. 4th grade used to be the year of the big curriculum bump, when children had to make the leap from learning to read to reading to learn. 4th grade was also typically the time when learning disabilities started to emerge, and parents would call me to evaluate their child. Now students are expected to make this transition by 3rd grade, which is part of the reason why we, in education and psychology, think there's been an uptick in the number of young children diagnosed with learning disabilities and ADHD. Educators are also concerned about the number of parents who want to redshirt their sons, wait a year to enroll them in kindergarten in order to give them an edge. It used to be that when the demands were reasonable and age appropriate, kids with minor learning issues could still learn to compensate on their own. This is not the case when even normal kids are struggling to keep their heads above water. Decades ago, boys who lacked motivation were called late bloomers. Today, however, we call them underachievers. A late bloomer has a chance to catch up. An underachiever is already behind. Eventually, the late bloomer will find his way, but the underachiever needs help, and he needs it now. Helping kids to become more efficient so that they can deal with unrealistic expectations has not always going to work. Keep that in mind before you throw more money at the problem by hiring tutors, therapists, and academic coaches. These services might help, but they are not going to fix your son. Myth 2. He's not working up to his potential. As a 10-year-old boy, I received some shocking news. I was not living up to my potential. At least this was the report delivered to my mother at the annual parent-teacher conference by Miss Becca, my 4th grade teacher. Although this feedback was meant to prod me to greater academic heights, it only led to confusion. I took this to mean I was not smart enough. Was there some unfulfilled level of accomplishment out there I had yet to reach? Have I achieved it yet? Have you? The prevailing myth is that opt-outs have more potential that somehow needs to be unlocked. We fall into the trap hinted at by a recent advertisement of the March of Dimes, which asserts every baby is born to do something great. As a nation, we've bought into an obsession with greatness. Americans have always believed that with a little grit and ingenuity, any goal is reachable, any obstacle surmountable. We conquered the frontier and put a man on the moon. However, children cannot be made new and improved with each generation. Potential is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's a term that sounds like it is all about growth, but which has really become synonymous with competition. When parents complain that their son is not achieving his potential, what they are really saying is, I believe he's so smart that if worked up to his potential 100% of the time, he'd be at the top of his class. The danger here is that all of the emphasis is placed on the outcome rather than on the process. Our race to produce top-performing students who have achieved their potential by the age of 18 may be robbing them of the very thing they need most to succeed. enough space to learn by trial and error, enough freedom to learn on their own, and enough time to grow. Even though this is, seemingly, the biological purpose of adolescence, these days we want to speed up the process. More damaging, however, is the way this pressure to perform distracts us from core values that children need to learn. The value of owning our work rather than getting a parent or tutor's help to polish every paper or project. The value of taking time to do household chores rather than dedicating each effortful hour to homework. And the value of experiencing minor failures and setbacks so that you know how to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try again. When it comes to children, we must ask ourselves, potential for what? Myth 3. Overparenting will help your son. After 50 years of economic growth, it's dawning on parents that their children can no longer count on doing better economically than they have done. Historian Paula Fass asserts that this worry is pushing well-meaning moms and dads to do more than just prepare their kids for the future. They are trying to take full control of it. With enough oversight, tutoring, and coaching, they misguidedly believe they can commandeer their children's natural course of development and compensate for any genetic shortfalls that may make them less competitive. Instead of accepting our sons' limitations and giving them the space to grow, we become over-involved and controlling to make sure they stay at the head of the pack. If the trend continues, parents will be using drones instead of helicopters to monitor their children. As we shall see, all of this help may have actually contributed to your son's opting out. What's more, instead of preparing your son for the future, all of this frantic preparation may be robbing him of it. What I have learned in over 20 years as a clinical psychologist is that above all else, these kids need less pressure and more time to develop. Yet this is not what most parents feel free to give them. Most parents aggravate the problem by either getting overly involved or not setting firm enough limits. Many do both at the same time. They oversee and they nag, but they never hold their son accountable for the choices they make. It is naive to think that boys can be pushed to excel through sheer force of parental oversight. In fact, overparenting may be responsible for having created the problem in the first place. Those helicopter parents we hear so much about, the parents whose chief offense is the loving impulse to do too much for their kids and to pay too much attention, may in truth actually be diminishing their children's chances of developing their own well springs of motivation and productivity. By the end of this book, you will have shifted paradigms to one where your son is not lazy. Instead, you will realize that his brain is still developing. He is searching for manhood, worried about his future, and in need of greater autonomy, more accountability, and the freedom to fail. You will learn to ask different questions, listen more closely to his answers, and give him the trust he needs so he can begin to believe in himself. Before moving on, I will leave you with this. Mark Kelly is the head of the lower school at the Assumption School in Houston, Texas. He has years of experience in education, having taught in Boston and New Orleans before landing in Houston. Mark told me that parents frequently approach him to say, "I have done everything I can possibly think of for my son, but he is still struggling. What more can I possibly do?" To this pleading, Kelly bluntly replies, "You have done everything but step out of his way."